and welcome to Thursday's episode of the 905er podcast and our weekly 905 roundup. My name is Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
And we've got another 3 stories from the 905 today to look at. And we're going to start off with, well, guess what? The election. Joel, what's the latest from the campaign trail, as they say on things like this?
Well, I think people. I think people are kind of bored with the campaign trail myself, but I myself, I couldn't care less. That being said, there was something on the old Twitter bot, the Twitter machine, that caught my eye. David Coletto of Abacus Data tweeted out on Monday a recent poll that they did for them on the provincial election and the what people's opinions of things were. And it caught my eye because a lot of the numbers were backing up kind of what we've been saying so far on this podcast in the 3 episodes that we've been doing so far on the leader platforms. Conservatives, we're still waiting on you. Hint, hint, knock, knock. The data kind of backed up what we were saying is that people are that the 3 progressive parties are missing the plot on terms of what people are expecting post-COVID. And I say that because the first thing they point out was the desire for change in this province. And 52% say it's definitely time for a change in government. So you would think, oh my gosh, Doug Ford must be sweating going to bed every night thinking his job's on the line. Except no, the PCs are currently sitting at 35%. They're the leader in terms of voting intention, with the Liberals at 28 and the NDP a close third at 24. But what really struck me shockingly is the impressions of the party leaders are all deeply in the negatives, with Doug Ford at 44%, Stephen Del Duca at 32%, and Andrew Horwath at 31%. And we've seen they have the impression of Doug Ford in Ontario pretty much since the start of the pandemic. Well, I should say at the start of the pandemic he had good numbers, but then I'm going to say probably about the 5th wave or so. Sorry, scratch that, more like 3rd wave. It looks like his numbers just tanked. People just gave up on him. They said, you don't know what you're doing. Which kind of brings me to, I view this as reemphasizing what you and I have been saying all along during this pandemic, is that people are not happy with Doug Ford. I think they view him as messing up the pandemic. They look at the long-term care home situation and they shake their heads at that. They look at their schools and they're ticked off with that. They're looking at the stressed out nurses and doctors who have been ignored repeatedly and marginalized during the pandemic in favor of politically expedient messaging. And the millions of dollars in breaks and preferential treatment given to Galen Weston and Loblaws and Walmart and Amazon and the like. And they're just fed up with it. And they turn to the Liberals and the NDP and the Green Party, more so the Liberals and the NDP, and they shake their heads and say, you guys are fighting the election of 2018. Times have changed. We're trying to rebuild something after the pandemic. There are things that we like, things that we don't like, things that people are just saying, we want this change. We want to see this. We're done putting up with this as a status quo. This is the cost of doing business excuse. We want this fixed. And they're not hearing it from the Liberals or the NDP.
No, there's, what I noticed today on Twitter was, I follow all the party leaders, I think, certainly most of them, and sometimes I actually read what they say. And Andrea Horwath, after the debate, was tweeting out a number of things, a lot of things attacking the Liberals, as is her right. I say nothing about that particularly, but the responses to that were very one-sided. My usual experience of leaders' tweets during election campaigns is, the party faithful on one side will dive in and say, wonderful, wonderful, thank you, you're such a great leader. And then people from the other parties will dive in and say, you're terrible, you're a crook, you should be in prison. And it's all very boring and pointless. But that's how it goes. Overwhelmingly, 90% plus of the responses to Andrea Horwath's tweets were, Andrea, shut up, don't go after Stephen Del Duca, we don't care. Go after Doug Ford. Get rid of Ford. Get rid of Ford. Get rid of Ford. And I'm not saying that as a way of saying people are fans of Del Duca. Most people probably couldn't pick him out of a lineup 2 or 3 weeks ago, the fact that she's trailing him in popularity when most people would walk past him on the street and not know who he was, literally days ago, it's kind of tells its own story, but yeah, it's like, Andrew, you're running the wrong election. This is not what we want right now. We want to get rid of Doug. We don't care who else wins. We don't want the PCs.
Right.
And again, I will come back again and again in a very boring fashion to our electoral system and the results it creates. But unfortunately, it's true. There is a clear, not an overwhelming, but there is a clear majority of Ontarians who agree broadly. As I said, we went through the Green Party platform, NDP, the Liberal. I was like, if the colour of the ink hadn't told me which party wrote it, I wouldn't really have been able to tell. A few things would have given it away here and there.
Right.
By and large, an awful lot of it could be any party that wrote it. And I would happily accept any party who delivered those policies, by and large.
Well, on that note, though, like we just finished reviewing the Liberal platform. We were shocked at just, once you actually read through it, there were a lot of policies in there that were like, yeah, this is what I've been looking to see. This is stuff that I think is really exciting and it made me stop and say, wait, what would happen if we did this? And they're not talking about that on the campaign trail. Like
I would say the
what shocked me overall,
what I'm seeing, and like I didn't watch the debate. I never watch debates. I hate debates. I think they're a waste of time. I know that's stupid and it's unforgivable doing a podcast like this and the rest of it, but that's just how.
No, it's not. They're all the same. They like everybody. Rarely do you get a 1-2 punch. What you should be watching is the commentary after the fact, because every partisan says, "Oh, it's very clear. The winner was my leader." And it might throw through bones to the other guys, but for the most part, it's. You go to the punditry to say, oh, who won, who lost, and that kind of tells you who won or who lost. I've never met anyone who formed their opinion on a debate. You only turn into a debate because you want that one slip up that somebody really just torpedoed their shot at winning, or the quick wow, I'm trying to think like the pippy one-liners, right? That's what we're looking for, but. I look at the election so far, and one thing I've always been floored at is the fact none of the progressive parties are championing UBI. It's all in their platforms. It's all they're all saying we're going to bring it back in one form or another. Yet none of them really champion it as like this is a cornerstone of our platform. I don't know what the cornerstones of their platforms are. Like there's no narrative to them. It's just here's a few tax credits. Here's I know Stephen Del Duca talks about economic dignity for people, but then he goes on the big thing that I've only heard about so far really is the $1 GO train ride that we talked about, and it's just like no, like sell the vision. It's like it's tough. I mean, I will say this, that I think. We were talking the other day, offline, and we were talking about, Roosevelt's New Deal, and you'll hear politicians talking about a New Deal, a Green New Deal is a phrase that's around, and Roosevelt, someone like Roosevelt, obviously he seized the public imagination of his day in a fundamental way with the concept of the New Deal. And that New Deal actually transformed the United States in many, many ways. And that's kind of what we're looking for. But I'm not even sure that if a politician was trying to sell that today, that anybody would be willing to listen to it. It's not just them not saying the right things. It's us, to an extent, not being willing to listen to what they're trying to say. It's that thing of we kind of get the politicians we deserve sometimes. Now, I think we deserve better than this, I have to say, and I think they can do better than this. But I do think the sort of media landscape has changed so much. I mean, why were debates important? Well, they used to be important because there were only a handful of channels, and that's, if the debate was on, then you probably had to watch it because there might not be a whole lot else on that evening. Well, now the whole media is like, anybody under about 40 doesn't have cable anymore. I don't have cable. I don't even know what channel the debate was on. I don't really watch television. I watch a lot of things that are on a screen, but they're not television in the traditional sense. There are fewer and fewer ways in which you can communicate, and I give
them some, not credit, but I give them some recognition of that fact.
This election does strike me as being very antiquated to the modern era. It does. Like I find the arguments being put forward are for 2018 or before. Nobody seems to accept the fact that we're in a rebuilding phase. Really, I mean, nobody wants to talk about it publicly. And I agree. We did talk about the idea of a Roosevelt New Deal. I think that's what people are wanting to see. They're tired of. They saw a glimpse of it during the pandemic, right? Being able to work from home and saving the money that way, the freedom to work as you please, not being stuck in a 9-to-5 job, to focus more time on your family and friends, the necessity to fix the gaps in our healthcare system, to give the nurses and doctors the fair pay and the respect that they deserve. The fact that I think there are a lot of boomers now who are terrified at the prospect that one day they might end up in an Ontario long-term care home. The parents who are frustrated with the lack of good education options and the insane push towards this online virtual schooling that the current government wants to hold, when we all saw it was an abject failure from firsthand experience. And it's just, people are just fed up with it. They're fed up with the insanity of keep doing this stuff over and over again. And they want to change. They want somebody to say, we're going to give you a new deal. These things that don't work, we're going to fix them. And it's going to require big thinking and big and bold ambition. But you know what? It's got to happen. And instead what we're getting is that undersell, overperform mentality of the 90s and early 2000s that, it got Jean Chrétien and Stephen Harper their victories, and it got McGuinty his victory, same as it got Kathleen Wynne her victory. But the last 2-3 years have changed things. This is the aftertime, and that's why I think these campaigns are not clicking with the public at large.
And politics is so much different now. It's more, the parties are more fractured. The country, the nation, the world is so much more divided. Yeah. We need to, Andrea Horwath, with the greatest respect, is running the typical NDP campaign. I mean, it's a campaign that seems to assume that they're going to end up in third place, or at best keep their second place, because of the amount of time she's going after the Liberals. It's basically like, these assholes are going to beat us again, so I have to keep on going after them. And I don't think, it certainly doesn't resonate with anybody. I just don't think anybody really cares, apart from the really party faithful. Del Duca is not exactly setting the world alight. I think if one of them had said, even in the absence of the other one, if one of them had unilaterally said, I am willing to do a deal right now, before the election, which is the only time it can happen. It can't happen after the election because the numbers are showing us that basically we're going to split the vote right down the middle in every bloody riding in Ontario, and Doug Ford will win. A majority, not a minority, a majority. If one of them has said at that point, I am willing to do that. I am willing to... This is the most important thing in their generation, that this Trumpian, extreme religious right wave that has infected the Western world over the last decade has to be stopped by whatever means possible. And that, if I'm an NDP voter, the Liberals, the lesser of two evils is less evil. The Liberals are manifestly less evil than the PCs. If you're a Liberal and you have some issue with, unions or whatever, again, manifestly, the NDP are less evil than the PCs. You can work it out. You have to work it out. The only reason not to work it out is because you think you can win alone one of these times. Well, it hasn't happened for the NDP in a long time.
This isn't that time.
It's not that time.
This isn't that time.
And it's too important. No. I mean, it's too late now. It's not going to happen. Basically, we're facing another 4 years. And God help us. I mean, really, God help us with another 4 years of Doug Ford.
Oh, God.
Because the stuff he's done, I mean, it's so niggling in some ways. It's just... some of it's just spiteful and small-minded. But I mean, that collectively over the long haul, the destruction it's doing to what I considered since I've lived here, the kind of the advantages of the Canadian way of life, the Ontario kind of way of life as well, the very good sides of that, the broadly kind of progressive consensus that exists or has existed in this nation, that's all getting ripped up. And I don't think this is the same even as when you go back to, the Eves and, oh God, his name's gone out of my head. Previous guy.
Bernie.
Before Eves, yeah.
Mike Harris.
My God, I didn't live through it, people. That's why I can forget his name.
I did.
It's worse even than that, because these people are.
It is. What's
happening in the US? These guys are signed up for the abortion stuff, the whole shooting match. They are on board with that. We're seeing Polivo, partying with bloody Jordan, whatever his name is, Peterson, odious creeps of the First Order, who are blowing every dog whistle possible for entitled white feelings of injury. And we can't afford to let it go because, the NDP has to, we want to beat the Liberals, or the Liberals, really, we don't like the NDP that much. It's like, get over it.
It's so petty. It's so petty. They're gonna come back and look at this as the most embarrassing moment in their party lives. Anywho, let's move on. Let's take a break for our lovely sponsor, and then we'll be right back to pick up the final two stories of the episode. Okay, and we're back. So this other little tidbit of news that I found happens to be in Hamilton, reported by Matthew Van Dongen of the Spectator, and it was published again on Monday. But guess what, people? If you live in Hamilton and you got fined for having a beer or a drink in a public park underneath the Hamilton bylaw, you might want to go and look at getting a refund, because it turns out that bylaw doesn't exist. It was determined that there's a non-existent bylaw that was repealed back in 2005. Nobody knows why, apparently, but it didn't exist. However, that didn't stop Hamilton police from going into public parks and issuing fines to anyone who was caught drinking in the park. Now, most years that never happened, except in 2021. You might remember there's a little thing called a global pandemic happening, and we weren't allowed to go drinking in restaurants and bars, so people decided to do it in parks. Apparently, bylaw officers handed out 72 booze in park tickets, totaling about $5,400, or that's $75 per ticket. And so they're expected to hand out, apparently only 44 of those people actually pay the tickets. Good on you. And so that means that they're going to be issuing out 44 letters to getting a refund for those fines. However, of course, this means that now the city council has to, according to Councillor John Paul Danko, let's look into best practices of other communities and see what the pros and cons of changing the policy would be and whatnot. And I just want to bring it up because I think I'm going to bring my editorial opinion here, but say, just let it go. Let people drink in parks. Really? What are we afraid of? That somebody's going to drink in a park and have a good time with friends and family? My God, are we that puritanical that we can't have a beer or a bottle of wine in Gage Park or wherever?
It's an interesting thing, having grown up in Europe. That I remember not understanding why you would see people in like Starsky and Hutch or whatever North American TV shows with bottles in brown paper bags, and it took me a while as a young and stupid youth to sort of work out this you have to hide your booze if you're in a park or in a public place in North America. And I don't know. I mean, I guess the people living on the streets with alcohol problems in Europe just do it more out in the open. It's not. It makes no difference to the problem. I mean, these are rules that get flouted anyway by people who are going to flout them or have addiction problems that mean they are likely to flout them. For the rest of us, I've never really. I mean, it's a blanket. I mean, as it says, the whole thing's stupid anyway, because Hamilton was enforcing a bylaw it didn't have, but provincial law says you can't drink in public, so it's still against the law. It's just that the bylaw officers wouldn't have been able to find people. It would require the police to find people.
No, but here's one of the, I mean, we're just before the break, we were poo-pooing on Doug Ford, but, give a credit where it's due. The provincial government did kind of say, no, we're not going to enforce the provincial laws. We're going to encourage the municipalities not to enforce that law. Let people drink in public parks. I mean, now why wouldn't he just go in and repeal the law? That, God forbid, that might actually take some work, and might have to come in on a day to do it. But the province is saying just don't enforce it. Now, I understand the rules around it are. Well, the thing about it is, you're going to have public intoxication and vandalism and whatnot. I'm like, yeah, true, but that still doesn't stop people from walking out of a bar fully intoxicated, and it still doesn't stop people from vandalizing public property. And we have laws against that. So yeah, if you drink and you're intoxicated, well, guess what? You broke the law. You go to jail for public intoxication. But if you have a bottle of wine split between 4 friends, probably not going to be intoxicated and might just have a lively conversation. That's all. It's just puritanical, and part of my derogatory terminology here, Roland, but it's very Victorian England-esque.
Those guys like their port
in its approach. Oh well, God. But
yes, it is puritanical.
We pride ourselves on. Oh, we like our beer, right? We're a good beer drinking society. Good beer drinking culture and whatnot. Yet, oh no, but just keep that out of sight. Keep that indoors. Don't.
I think it's very much a North American thing. I mean, that's like the beer store and the LCBO. These are hangovers from a puritanical age where we thought we had to control alcohol. Very much in the same way that we control drugs today. And I mean, it's just not even a very good example, seeing as that marijuana is legal. But tobacco today maybe is treated. We've got this wacky system as a result, which is just literally a historical sort of artifact. And I don't think, passing laws that are actually unenforceable is never a good idea. Actually stopping people from drinking in parks, virtually impossible. You can waste time ticketing a few people, but, the people who cause problems through alcohol consumption in public places are not the people who will... going to be, that doesn't work that way. It's a social ill. It needs to be dealt with through the ways that you handle social problems, not through ticketing people.
The person who does that trouble, whether it's due to an addiction or just youthful exuberance, as the case may be, they'll do it anyways. They'll just do it in private, then go out in public and cause trouble. In which case, yeah, you're going to ticket them or charge them with misdemeanor, violence, vandalism, public intoxication, whatever the case may be. But my God, just let's bring ourselves into the 21st century. What gets me though is, to bring it back full circle to Hamilton, is this now they figured, we cocked it up. The police didn't even know their own bylaws, and were sending out bylaw officers to enforce, and nobody caught it until after $5,000 were issued. So now the city council, instead of just saying, okay, you know what, forget it, let it go. Now we have to do a study. You have to pay for a study to do a consultation, and then we have to go tell city staff, let's go look at other municipalities. Why not just take the leadership and say, you know what, we're doing away with it. We're going to be that forward thinking city and say, yeah, you can. You can. We'll allow you to have a drink in a park, and you won't be harassed by it. Just don't do anything stupid afterwards.
And perhaps Councillor Danko would suggest that, maybe that's what will come out of the study. But yeah, I mean, I think, the thing that gets which I think is most kind of hilarious in this whole thing is that, basically the bylaw rules they were enforcing were from before 2005. they realized that they'd actually been repealed. And it says, Public Works doesn't know why they were repealed. It's like, for the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. But this is not unusual in city halls. It's not just Hamilton either. Like, I do think Hamilton does a particularly good job at this kind of, incompetence. But, I've heard some stories within recent history of other cities that shall remain nameless, perhaps, of the way that things like council requests from councillors to staff are maintained, and they ain't some kind of highly complex database system. Let's put it that way. You're almost, so it's something that is as recent as 2005. It's basically lost to the annals of history. It might as well be medieval Europe or something, because they don't know why it was repealed.
Right.
What a mess. But this level of government is so important because it touches us every day of our lives, and yet even the most basic things just seem beyond them. It's frustrating.
So let's continue on to the last, but not least, and certainly not the. This is a good one as well, I think. Roland, what do you got if we take a look at the other side of the 905?
Yeah, this is a story from Brampton that the Pointer website and newspaper. They call it a newspaper, but it's online. But yeah, it's a very good news source for Brampton and Mississauga. And again, it's one of these stories that's going to get completely buried, other than thanks to the work of the Pointer in the current environment of the election and Patrick Brown running for the Conservative leadership and so on. And that is a report on anti-black discrimination at Brampton City Hall. I think, as any of our listeners will know, Brampton is a city with a strong majority of people who identify as visible minorities, either black or South Asian or Asian or whatever. About 73.3% of Brampton's residents identify as being visible minorities. 13.9% identify as black. Brampton City Hall, it really is as simple as this. Brampton City Hall only employs 36.8% of employees who identify as being in any way racialized, which is like, how do you even manage that in a city as diverse as Brampton? And then you think, well, look at the council, which is predominantly white and male, the last time I checked anyway. And I'm not blaming anybody specifically. I'm not blaming council or councillors specifically, but this is how city halls work. They are so small c conservative. They so enforce the status quo. And again, not necessarily. This is what institutional racism is. It's not intentional racism very often, or usually even. It's the institution itself perpetuates racism through the way it works. And boy, in my as a white man, in my experience at city halls, do I recognize that thing of the institution perpetuating a state.
If you want to think like how they about how they would have gotten to that spot, like you're right. I don't think this was an intentional, like, oh no, there's a blanket policy. We only hire white people. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But you're right. It is an example of institutional racism. And by that, if you think about most of those people, probably like the higher ups would have been hired, most likely at a lower position at some point in their younger career days. Probably when Brampton's demographic makeup was a little bit more skewed towards white people, and most likely they kept a job for a long time. And that's what happens, right? You get people who stay, and then they have the institutional knowledge, right? Because you've moved up through the network, like through your department, and maybe switched over a few departments to different positions. You have that historical knowledge of how things worked and how to get things speed. So your value, we can't lose Joe, we can't lose Jane, because they know how to get things done. And that leaves little room for people of racialized backgrounds and visible minorities from getting in the front door. I don't know if there's fault to be put on anyone necessarily, but I do look at that as like, that's.
I mean, I think the fault is with the
people start to retire.
But the fault is with the leadership of that institution, who should know better by now. I mean, this is a report carried out on behalf of the city by Williams HR Consulting, and a summary version was reported on before, but it goes beyond this. I mean, it talks of a culture of I'm just trying to find the quote again, which I read literally 5 seconds ago, so that I get it right. This is frustrating about recording these things, listeners, that you see a fantastic quote that you want to make sure you get right, and then you lose it. But if I can find it, a culture of fear of recrimination for anyone who sort of raised any queries about discrimination, or here we go. A culture of fear, oppression, and reprisal at the city with respect to bringing forward complaints in general, and specifically complaints regarding discriminatory conduct. Employees don't trust HR. That's not uncommon in my experience in other places. And most Black and racialized participants were able to give examples of racially discriminatory conduct and comments from colleagues that they recall being personally witness to. I mean, I wouldn't expect Brampton to be particularly unusual. That's a sad thing. I would expect it to be very usual, in fact.
Government is the last thing to respond, I think, to social change. If you think about any time there's been any huge progressive movement for change in the last 10, 20, 30 years or so, it comes from society. It's people getting organized, and they say, no, we demand change. Because if you think about it, like as we described, the demographics of Brampton have changed over the course of people being hired. So people are hired, they stay in their job, they say, no, I'm going to retire here, but I plan to do a 20, 30-year career at the city of Brampton, usually. Like they are good paying jobs typically. And you have a chance for upward mobility, growth and whatnot. Over that time, the demographics of the city have changed. So you have this kind of weird imbalance where the bureaucracy is woefully out of date in terms of its demographic makeup. And you have the needs and the social dynamic and the cultural dynamic that goes along with that of a changing municipality. And you have this kind of weird, it's a potential of this city hall that is out of touch with the city. And it leads to problems. And this is where the notion of systemic racism comes back, and it harms all of us.
Yeah. And I think
you have a city that's changing and is modern. And then you're still having these these views that are just not up with the modern needs of the city that you're trying to serve.
Yeah, and ultimately, things like this, like institutional racism, they reflect institutional conservatism, again with a small c. I'm not being political when I say that. Mm-hmm. That there is in government, and my experience of local government is not that extensive, but I think it's enough one way or another to see the massive inertia against change that exists in city halls. The caution, the fear of change in many ways, the habit of departments to become kind of islands within the city hall that view themselves in a defensive way of protecting themselves against outside encroachment, or defending themselves from councillors and from council decisions, of defending themselves, defending their budgets, of defending, it's a very unhealthy mentality. Then you throw the public into it, who are often being very, very critical of anything council does. And again, you go into defensive mode, because it's like, okay, these guys are out to get us. We've got to do whatever we can to keep the, well, as someone said in Hamilton last week, the barbarians from the gates. And he used it in a context that was far more unfortunate. But anyway, But yeah, I know, and racism gets caught all up in that because it's like, we like the way things work now. Just leave us alone to get on with it is kind of the overwhelming sort of cultural outlook I feel at too many city halls. But yeah, I mean, it's particularly shocking in a place like Brampton with the racial makeup that Brampton has, and it's really got to change. And it's like, we've got to be looking, if Brampton elects another council this year that is, majority white, majority male, in a city that is just not majority white and never was majority male, it's like, what is wrong with our political process that does this year after year after year?
You know what? Here's hoping that more racialized Bramptonians, more female racialized Bramptonians, step up and put their names on the ballot and try to make their community a better place. And all the power to you. I mean, if you're one of those racialized female Bramptonians, and that sounds so condescending, and I apologize in advance for that. Yeah. If you want to, I'd be open to hearing from you. I'd like to hear from.
I think what I do. Yeah, I mean, it running for politics is tough for anybody. Running.
Yeah.
It's so much tougher. It's so much tougher. I know I had it easier when I ran because I was a white male. I could, simply from a practical perspective, I can knock on doors in places and at times of day that a female candidate can't, or would perhaps be, would perhaps decide they didn't want to do. Let's put it that way. You would hope they were safe, but the reality is whatever. And the same goes if you're non-white. I would imagine that just adds a whole other dimension to things. So yeah, I mean it's and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other ways in which.
But here's, what I think we should just close off the episode because we're coming up near our 40-minute mark. But let's just close up by saying, there's an opportunity here. That there's an election coming. There's an opportunity for more racialized Bramptonians of whatever background you may be to step up and run and hopefully just start changing that dynamic. Because the thing is that will have to change, especially as the baby boomers start to retire, which they are. They're getting to that age. So in the next 4 or 5 years, I suspect you're going to see a lot more opportunities open for racialized Bramptonians, hopefully to find their ways into the bureaucracy and start making careers and start being that change to make the policies and the things that happen in the city hall more reflective of the community that they are trying to serve.
That sounds like a good thing. Well, thanks everybody. We'll be back next week with more from the 905er.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
you looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.